Hey guys, welcome to the Libero Network. My name is Robin Baker, and today we're going to be talking about how to cope with a certain aspect of recovery, specifically eating disorder recovery, and specifically coping with a sense of loss. The topic was presented really, what was the most difficult thing to cope with in your recovery? And yes, the eating was hard, the regaining the weight, the body size change was difficult. But something no one really talked about, to me at least, during my recovery, was this sense of loss. And there was loss in two areas. So one of them being, I felt like I lost part of my identity, mainly because I identified with my eating disorder so much. It was so much a part of me that when I started separating from my eating disorder and establishing a life without it in my recovery, there was a sense of loss. There was a hole that needed to be filled. And then the second part of this sense of loss was once I was in recovery and I was kind of looking back at my life when I was in my eating disorder and realizing all of the opportunities I missed, all of the relationships that failed, all of the friendships that ended, all of the things that I missed out on because I was so entrenched in my eating disorder. And that sense of loss, like I will never ever get that back. And that sense of loss, which built resentment towards my eating disorder, towards myself, and how to cope with that, because that is a huge, huge piece that really wasn't addressed in my recovery, and I didn't really expect to have to deal with that. So this video is all about coping with loss in those two areas. So coping with the sense of loss in the sense of losing a piece of yourself or losing a piece of me when I was going through recovery, which was my eating disorder, because that was basically my best friend, my safety blanket, my coping mechanism. It was everything I turned to, right, when the world was in craziness, crazy mode. And it was the thing that I used to cope with life. It was the way I got by. It was the only way I was okay, quote unquote. And when that is taken away from you, not only is it difficult to cope, there's also this sense of, well, who am I? Who am I without this thing, without this eating disorder? Who am I, and what is my quote unquote purpose? What is the point, right? So this is really early on in stages of recovery. I think that people deal with this. I know I dealt with this very early on. And there is a sense of feeling like, where do I go from here? I don't know who I am anymore without this. This is my identity. I identify with my eating disorder so much. So the first suggestion I have for if you're going through this, and what I worked on a lot, was really discovering, what do I want? What do I want in my life? What do I want in my life without my eating disorder? And one of the most amazing exercises I did in treatment was write out a list of 50 things I want without my eating disorder. And not only did that give me a sense of direction, some goals to meet, and some motivation to stay with my recovery, it also made me remember all of the things that really brought me joy in life. All the things that lit me up, all the things that were maybe a passion of mine. So making a list like that is really important because it helps you identify, what is something that brings you joy? What is something that is your passion? And exploring those things and actively participating in those things will help to reestablish a sense of self without your eating disorder. So the other thing you might want to try if you're dealing with this sense of loss, like you don't know who you are without your eating disorder, is to put yourself in social situations where you really don't know anybody and you have to actually meet people physically. Like you have to be present in another space with someone. In this day and age, it's very easy to kind of get trapped behind the computer, behind the phone, behind the laptop, where we're interacting with people via social media, via text. And that can make it actually more difficult to really learn about who you are and what's important to you. And one of the best ways I know for myself to learn about who I am, what's important to me, and who I am without my eating disorder especially, is when I'm in a social situation where I don't know anybody or I don't know many people, and I'm really forced to, introduce myself to people and get to know them. And as uncomfortable and awkward as it may feel, it is a huge growth in your recovery, and it is a huge step in learning who you are without your eating disorder and establish more of a sense of self. So then moving into dealing with a sense of loss, sense of loss that you missed out on a lot. You missed out on a lot because of your eating disorder. You might have missed out on opportunities, on getting into the college you want, on a relationship. Maybe you were in a relationship and your eating disorder really took over your life and it ended, and you have this sense of loss, like if only I had recovered or I didn't have my eating disorder, I would still be in this relationship. So for me, I dealt with a ton of loss. I had my eating disorder for 10 years. And that was a decade of losing out on so many opportunities. And I dealt for a long time after being in my recovery with like, God, if I just didn't have my eating disorder, I might be in NYU, I might have graduated, I might be auditioning for Broadway shows, I might still be in the relationship with my high school sweetheart, I might, right? So I had this sense of like, God, if only I didn't have my eating disorder. And not only did this stop me from moving forward in my life, it also built a huge resentment, not only for my eating disorder, but for myself, because I figured, God, that was all my doing. I did this to myself. How could I have ever done this? I lost all these opportunities. So something I learned was that, and I'm sure most of you have heard this, but if you're dealing with this same sense of loss, this is something to really, really remember when you're dealing with this, is that your eating disorder was not a choice. It is a mental, something to really keep in mind when you're beating yourself up, or if you ever have beat yourself up for all the things you quote unquote, screwed up. So really keep that in mind. The second thing is really looking at your eating disorder from a different perspective. And I say this is, I would say this is easy, but it's very difficult. There's a big process that I went through where I learned to forgive myself for my eating disorder. Not only did I have to really understand and embody the fact that my eating disorder was not my fault, it was not a choice, but I also had to learn how to find gratitude for my eating disorder. Yes, gratitude, being grateful that I had an eating disorder. And as crazy as that might sound, it is the truth. And learning to find gratitude for everything in your life, not just, right, I'm so grateful I have a house, I'm so grateful I have money in the bank, I'm so grateful for the wonderful weather in California, yada, yada, yada. All these positive things. When you can find gratitude for things that have gone wrong in your life, quote unquote wrong, for things that have not been the best part of your life, that is truly when you are able to forgive and you're also set free. So that's it. I hope this video was helpful for you. If you are dealing with loss in your eating disorder recovery, I just want you to let you know that's completely normal. When I was in recovery, no one really talked about this aspect of recovery much, and it was a difficult part for me. And it didn't really show up until, a couple years later into my recovery. And, I thought I was going crazy. I'm like, why am I so angry at myself? What's going on? But it is really, really, it's a real thing. And if you're struggling with this sense of loss, it is normal. So I just don't want you to feel like this is strange and unique to you. In the comments below, I would love to hear feedback of, if you have dealt with feeling this sense of loss, and how did you cope with it? If you did any of these similar steps or similar processes that I just explained in the video, or if there's something different that you did that was really helpful for you. I would love to hear what you've done to help cope with this sense of loss. And if anything, you have questions about anything I mentioned in this video, please feel free to ask me. And just leave any comments in the section below. I'd love to hear from you. So again, I hope this video was helpful for you, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.